Here is the story. In a faraway village nestled deep within the African savannah, where the golden sun kissed the earth every morning and the evening skies painted the horizon in hues of orange and crimson, lived Tari, a farmer of humble origins. His life was simple, guided by the rhythms of nature and the seasons. Each day, Tari woke before dawn, his hands rough but steady as he tilled the soil and tended to his crops. His farm was modest, yielding just enough to feed his family and barter for the essentials he could not grow. The village admired Tari for his work ethic and kindness. He was the first to offer help when someone's roof leaked, or when a neighbor's cow wandered astray. Despite his meager means, Tari always found a way to share his bounty with those in need. Life, though tough, was fulfilling in its simplicity. But deep within Tari's heart, there lingered a quiet yearning, a longing for more than what the soil and sweat could provide. One fateful day, as the sun blazed mercilessly overhead and Tari rested beneath the shade of an ancient baobab tree, a stranger appeared on the horizon. Dressed in robes of deep crimson and gold, the man carried an air of mystery and power. He introduced himself as Mbali, a traveler and merchant who claimed to have traversed lands beyond the imagination of the villagers. His eyes were sharp and piercing, and his smile, though wide, carried an unsettling edge. Mbali spoke of wealth beyond measure, of treasures hidden beneath the earth and fortunes that could change a man's destiny overnight. Tari listened, captivated by tales of opulence and grandeur, his dreams stirred by the stranger's words. As the hours passed, Mbali leaned closer and lowered his voice, offering Tari a proposition. "There is a way," Mbali began, "for you to gain all the wealth you could ever desire. No more hard labor, no more struggles. But such riches come at a price." Tari's heart quickened. "What price?" he asked cautiously. Mbali's smile widened. "It's not a price of money but a promise, a commitment to fulfill a task when the time comes. I cannot say when or what it will be, but you must agree to my terms without question. In return, I will show you how to claim your fortune." The offer weighed heavily on Tari's mind. That night, as he lay on his straw mat in his modest hut, visions of a life free from toil filled his thoughts. He imagined a large home, abundant harvests, and his children dressed in fine clothes. The temptation was too great. By dawn, Tari found himself standing under the baobab tree where Mbali awaited. "I accept your terms," Tari said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. Mbali's grin was triumphant as he handed Tari a small, intricately carved wooden box. "This will guide you," Mbali said cryptically before vanishing as mysteriously as he had appeared. Inside the box was a stone that shimmered with an otherworldly light. As Tari held it, he felt a strange energy coursing through him, and his surroundings seemed to shift. Suddenly, he found himself standing before a vast field of gold. The earth sparkled, and at his feet lay a spade. Without thinking, Tari began to dig, unearthing coins and jewels that glittered brighter than the stars. Over the days and weeks that followed, Tari's life transformed. He sold the treasures in far-off markets, amassing wealth that brought him power and influence. He built the largest home in the village, bought the finest cattle, and employed workers to tend his land. The villagers, once his equals, now looked upon him with awe and envy. But beneath the surface of his newfound fortune, Tari began to feel an unease he couldn't shake. Strange things began happening. His crops, though lush and bountiful, carried an unnatural taste. Animals avoided his land, their instincts sensing something amiss. At night, Tari would wake to whispers that seemed to drift on the wind, voices he couldn't understand yet felt compelled to listen to. One evening, as the full moon bathed the village in silvery light, Mbali returned. He appeared in the same spot beneath the baobab tree, his crimson robes gleaming in the moonlight. Tari, though apprehensive, approached the stranger who had changed his life. "It is time," Mbali said, his voice echoing with an otherworldly timbre. "Your promise must now be fulfilled." Tari's throat tightened. "What is it that you ask of me?" Mbali's smile faded. replaced by an expression of grim determination. You must give back what you have taken, not in gold, but in something far more precious. Confused and frightened, Tari demanded answers, but Mbali's cryptic words only deepened his dread. Over the following days, misfortunes began to plague the village. Wells dried up, and the once fertile land turned barren. The villagers whispered that Tari's wealth was cursed, and their fear soon turned to anger. Isolated and tormented by guilt, Tari retreated to his home, where the shimmering stone still lay in its carved box. Its glow had dimmed, yet its presence felt heavier than ever. Tari realized that his wealth, gained so easily, had come at a cost not only to himself but to the very land and people he once cherished. Desperate to make amends, Tari sought Mbali, who seemed to vanish and reappear at will. Each encounter with the enigmatic stranger left Tari with more questions than answers. Yet, deep within, Tari began to understand the true nature of his predicament. As days turned to weeks and weeks to months, Tari's wealth began to slip through his fingers. The villagers, once enamored by his fortune, turned their backs on him, blaming him for their suffering. Tari, now a shadow of his former self, wandered the land, seeking a way to undo the damage he had caused. But the whispers in the night grew louder, and the shadows in his dreams deepened. The stone, once a symbol of his ambition, seemed to mock him, its light flickering like a dying flame. Tari's journey stretched on, taking him to distant lands and forgotten temples, where he sought answers from wise men and ancient texts. Each step brought him closer to a truth he was not ready to face, a truth that would forever bind him to the choices he had made. And so Tari's story continued, a tale of love lost, greed unmasked, and the eternal quest for redemption in a world where the weight of one's actions could never be undone. As requested, the story has no definitive ending, leaving Tari's fate shrouded in mystery. Tari's journey grew increasingly arduous as he ventured deeper into the unknown, guided only by fragments of ancient lore and his fading hope for redemption. The once proud farmer, whose name had echoed in his village with admiration, was now a man stripped of all he had gained, except the burden of his guilt and the mysterious stone that seemed to tether him to his mistakes. One stormy night, Tari found himself in a desolate wasteland, far removed from the lush greenery of his homeland. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. In the heart of this barren land, he came across a decrepit shrine, its walls inscribed with runes that glowed faintly in the darkness. The whispers that had haunted him for so long now grew louder, urging him to step inside. The shrine's interior was dimly lit by a soft, pulsating light emanating from its center. There, on an ancient pedestal, lay an object that mirrored the stone in his possession but radiated a darker, more sinister energy. Tari hesitated, sensing that this was the source of the curse that had engulfed his life. As he approached, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Mbali, his crimson robes now tattered, his once commanding presence diminished. "You seek to undo what cannot be undone," Mbali said, his voice tinged with both regret and resolve. "But the path you walk is not one of salvation. It is one of understanding." Tari clenched his fists, anger flaring within him. "Why did you do this to me? Why offer me wealth if it was only meant to destroy everything I held dear?" Mbali's expression softened, and for the first time, Tari saw a flicker of humanity in the enigmatic stranger. "I am but a messenger, Tari. The choices were always yours. The stone does not grant wealth. It reveals the true nature of those who hold it. It amplified your desires, your greed, and your ambition. What you lost was not taken from you. It was the price you paid for seeking what was never yours to begin with." Tari fell silent, the weight of Mbali's words crushing him. He had blamed the stone, Mbali, and even the gods for his misfortune, but now he realized that the choices he had made were his alone. Yet, he could not accept that the lives of his family, his village, and his land had been destroyed because of his selfishness. "Tell me," Tari pleaded, his voice breaking, "is there any way to bring back what I've lost? to heal the land, to restore the village. Mbali gestured toward the darker stone on the pedestal. There is a way, but it comes with a greater sacrifice. The stone before you holds the power to reverse what has been done, but to wield it, you must surrender something far more valuable than gold or treasures. Tari's heart sank. He had already lost everything. What more could he possibly give? "What must I do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mbali's gaze bore into him, heavy with unspoken truths. "You must give up your soul's freedom. To save what you've destroyed, you will become the guardian of this curse, bound to it for eternity. You will wander the earth, carrying the burden of greed and its consequences, ensuring no one else succumbs to its temptation. Your sacrifice will not be remembered, and your name will fade into obscurity. But the land and the people you love will thrive once more." Tari's breath hitched. The enormity of the choice before him was almost too much to bear. He thought of his family, his children's laughter, and the simple joy of life before the curse. He thought of the villagers who had turned against him, their anger and suffering justified by his actions. Could he undo their pain, even if it meant losing himself forever? Tari stepped forward, his resolve firm. "I will do it," he said. "If it means they can live in peace, I will bear the burden." Mbali nodded solemnly, his expression unreadable. "So be it." As Tari reached out to touch the darker stone, a surge of energy enveloped him, far more intense than anything he had felt before. Visions flooded his mind, of the lives he would save, the joy he would never again experience, and the endless journey that awaited him. The shrine trembled, and the runes on its walls blazed with light. The whispers that had haunted Tari merged into a deafening roar before fading into silence. When Tari opened his eyes, he was alone. The shrine had vanished, and the land around him was lush and vibrant once more. The barren wasteland was gone, replaced by fields of green and the distant hum of life returning. Yet, as Tari looked at his hands, he saw that they were no longer his own. They glowed faintly, marked with the same runes that had adorned the shrine. He had become the guardian. The stone, now fused with his being, pulsed with an eternal energy. His purpose was clear: to roam the earth, ensuring that no one else would fall victim to the curse of greed. He would watch over the villages and lands he had once called home, unseen and forgotten, but ever vigilant. And so Tari's journey continued, not as a man, but as a shadow of what he once was, a silent protector, bearing the weight of his choices and the hope that his sacrifice would prevent others from making the same mistake. The whispers returned, now his only companions in the endless expanse of time. His story became a legend, passed down through generations, a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed and the true meaning of wealth. But Tari himself would never again find rest. His fate bound to the stone and the promise he had made beneath the ancient baobab tree. Tari wandered the lands, his feet treading paths that no one else dared to walk. Seasons passed and the world changed, but Tari remained the same. A solitary figure bound by a promise he could never escape. Though he was invisible to the people he watched over, he could still see them, feel their joys, and share in their sorrows from a distance. Years turned into decades, and Tari witnessed the prosperity of his village return. Crops grew abundantly, rivers flowed with fresh water, and the laughter of children once again echoed through the fields. The villagers no longer spoke of the cursed wealth or the hardships that had once plagued them. They had forgotten Tari entirely, but their peace was all the reward he needed. But as the years stretched into centuries, Tari began to notice a disturbing pattern. Greed, the very force that had ensnared him, began to seep back into the hearts of the people. Traders haggled fiercely over goods, farmers hoarded their harvests, and the wealthier villagers began to look down on those with less. The cycle Tari had sacrificed everything to break seemed to be repeating itself. Despair gnawed at Tari's spirit. He had hoped his sacrifice would teach the people the dangers of greed, but time had eroded the lessons his story was meant to impart. The stone within him pulsed faintly, a reminder of the power he now wielded but could not use recklessly. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, Tari stood on the edge of his village, watching a wealthy merchant argue with a farmer over a debt. The farmer's family stood behind him, their faces etched with worry and hunger. Tari's hands clenched as anger surged through him. He wanted to intervene, to remind the villagers of the cost of greed, but his role as the guardian forbade him from interfering directly. Then, from the shadows of the trees, a familiar figure emerged. Mbali, the crimson-robed stranger, had not aged a day since Tari had last seen him. His piercing gaze met Tari's, and a knowing smile played on his lips. "You see now, don't you?" Mbali said, his voice as calm and enigmatic as ever. "Greed is not something that can be destroyed. It is a part of humanity, woven into the very fabric of their existence." Tari's eyes burned with frustration. Then what was the point of my sacrifice? If they are doomed to repeat the same mistakes, why did I give up everything? Mbali stepped closer, his expression softening. "Your sacrifice was not in vain, Tari. You gave them time to grow, to thrive, and to understand. But the lessons of the heart are never learned in one lifetime. They must be taught again and again." Tari's shoulders slumped under the weight of Mbali's words. "What am I supposed to do now? I am bound to this curse, wandering endlessly while they squander the peace I gave them." Mbali placed a hand on Tari's shoulder, a rare gesture of comfort. "Your role as the guardian is not to fix humanity's flaws. It is to remind them, to guide them, and to ensure that greed does not consume them entirely. The stone within you is a beacon, a warning and a gift. Use it wisely." With that, Mbali disappeared once more, leaving Tari alone with his thoughts. The words of the stranger echoed in his mind as he turned back to the village. He realized that his journey was far from over. The people needed him, not as a savior, but as a silent force that could steer them away from the brink of destruction. That night, Tari began to act. Though he could not reveal himself to the villagers, he used the power of the stone to leave subtle signs and warnings. A merchant's gold would vanish, only to reappear in the hands of a starving family. A farmer's hoarded grain would scatter in the wind, reminding him to share his bounty. Shadows danced in the moonlight, whispering cautionary tales of greed to those who sought too much. The villagers began to notice these strange occurrences. Some called them miracles, others saw them as omens, but all felt the presence of an unseen force watching over them. Slowly, the balance returned. The wealthy began to share, the poor found hope, and the village thrived once more. Tari watched from the edges of their world, his heart heavy yet hopeful. He knew the cycle would never truly end, but as long as he walked the earth, he could tip the scales toward compassion and generosity. His sacrifice had become his purpose, and though his journey had no end, he found solace in the knowledge that his actions, however small, could make a difference. And so, Tari continued his endless walk through the lands, a guardian unseen but ever present. His story lived on, not in the memories of the people, but in the quiet moments of kindness and the fleeting glimpses of light that reminded them of the true meaning of wealth. The whispers followed him, carrying his tale to those who would listen, ensuring that his sacrifice would never be forgotten entirely. Even as the world moved forward, Tari's journey had no ending, only the infinite path of redemption, hope, and the eternal struggle against the shadow of greed. Years passed, and Tari continued his silent vigil. He wandered far beyond his village, through deserts, forests, and mountains, always watching, always waiting. His presence was felt but never seen, and his subtle interventions saved many from the clutches of greed. Yet, deep within, Tari longed for something he could not name. A release, perhaps, or an end to the eternal burden he carried. One day, as the sun set over a vast, golden plain, Tari came upon a small, struggling village. The land was dry, the people thin and weary. Their crops had failed, and the well had run dry. Tari stood on the outskirts, his heart aching for the suffering he saw. He noticed a young boy, no more than 8, trying to draw water from an empty bucket. The boy's determination struck a chord within Tari, reminding him of the man he used to be. For weeks, Tari watched the boy. Despite the hardships, the child shared what little he had with others. His last piece of bread with a crying girl, his small bucket of water with an elder too weak to fetch their own. The boy's kindness spread like wildfire through the village, inspiring others to give and work together. Tari felt a warmth he hadn't known in centuries, a glimmer of hope in a world so often overshadowed by greed. One evening, as the boy sat alone by the dry well, staring up at the stars, Tari appeared before him. For the first time in years, he revealed himself, his glowing rune-marked form standing in the moonlight. The boy gasped but did not run. Instead, he tilted his head, curiosity shining in his eyes. "Who are you?" the boy asked softly. Tari knelt before him, the weight of his endless journey heavy in his voice. "I am a guardian, bound to watch over those who walk the path of greed and generosity. I have seen much in my time, but you, young one, have reminded me of something I had long forgotten." The boy blinked, his small hands clutching the edge of the dry well. "What have I reminded you of?" Tari smiled faintly, his voice warm yet tinged with sorrow. "That true wealth lies not in gold or treasures, but in the love and kindness we give to others. You, with so little, have given more than many who have everything." The boy frowned, his innocence piercing through Tari's centuries of wisdom. "But if you know that, why are you sad?" Tari hesitated, the stone within him pulsing faintly. "Because I have spent my life trying to fix a mistake I made long ago. I have walked this earth, bound to a curse I thought I deserved. But you have shown me that even the smallest act of kindness can change the world." The boy reached out, his small hand touching Tari's glowing arm. "Then maybe it's time for you to rest. Maybe you've done enough." Tari's eyes widened as the words sank in. Could it be true? Had he fulfilled his purpose? He looked into the boy's eyes and saw not just hope, but an unshakable belief that the world could be better. It was then that Tari understood. His burden was not meant to last forever. The lessons he had carried, the sacrifices he had made, had sown seeds of kindness and compassion in the hearts of those he had watched over. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the stone within Tari began to glow brighter than ever before. A warmth spread through his body, and he felt lighter, as if the weight of centuries was being lifted from his shoulders. The runes on his skin shimmered and began to fade, and the whispers that had haunted him fell silent. Tari knelt before the boy, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you. You have given me something greater than redemption. You have given me peace." With those words, Tari's form dissolved into light, his essence spreading across the land. The once dry well began to fill with crystal clear water, and the barren fields around the village turned green with life. The people awoke to find their land renewed, their struggles eased, though none knew how or why. But the boy standing by the well understood. He whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, his heart full of gratitude for the mysterious guardian who had watched over them. Tari's story became a legend, passed down through generations, a tale of a man who gave everything to teach the world the value of love, kindness, and the dangers of greed. And though Tari was gone, his spirit lived on in the hearts of those who chose to give, to share, and to care for one another. In the end, Tari's sacrifice had not been in vain. His journey, though long and painful, had left the world a better place. And as the winds carried his story to distant lands, his final act became a beacon of hope, reminding all who heard it that the greatest treasures in life are not those we hold in our hands, but those we carry in our hearts.